Good morning, anyone who is hanging out. Let's get right to this today. If I can figure out what I was doing. There we go. Okay, cool. We're streaming. We have sound going. We have video going. Today should probably be a short stream. With the holidays, I've got lots of extra stuff to do. We finished the weapon class yesterday, so we're going to go ahead and do sound today. So that should consist of, we're going to test and see if the game mode will work for our sound manager, because I'm hoping it will, and then recording a few generic sounds for firing the pistol and swinging the weapon, and then setting it up so our base weapon structure contains those sounds, and then calling the events appropriately when we fire it off. So that's our plan. And hello, Harry. So the first thing I want to do is we're going to need to make a new folder called game framework. We'll just call it framework. This is where we're going to put our game modes and things like that. So we can move this over here now. And what I'm hoping is I can create a child and have the child call back to the main game mode and have it do stuff. That is my hope, at least. Which is no way of me knowing. So what we're going to do is, on the begin play, we're going to print string. We're just going to print out hello. And I need to fix this one, so we'll do that while we're in here. So input mode. Oh, what is this one? UI only? Okay, so we'll get rid of our deprecated version, replace it with a non-deprecated version. We'll compile out our game mode, and we should get hello. Which, I did not. I do have the FPS game mode, right? Nope, I have game mode base. So somewhere I've created a game mode and not been paying attention to where, well, okay. Oh, no, oh my gosh, you're kidding me. Whoa, wait a minute. Whoa, wait a minute. Have I never changed it over to our... I never changed our game mode over to FPS game mode. Really? Okay, that doesn't seem good. Did I just implement it and then never actually... Okay, now I'm super confused. Bear with me for a minute. There's our game over screen, which is inside of our FPS game mode. This is what it was using a second ago, game mode base. Yeah, whoa. I think maybe that was just a weird bug, because it should have been using game mode. Oh well. Anyway, oh yeah, you know what? It probably was showing the game mode base because I didn't have the FPS game mode recompiled because of the error, but then when I fixed it. Okay, so we're good. It's just one of those stupid using an old version of a blueprint because it wasn't compiled because of the deprecated code, because of blah 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 stupid stuff. Basically, if you ever have yellow here, never let it exist. Always fix it. Okay, so and good morning, James. So the key here now is we're going to make a child here, and we're going to call this one the child. We're going to override the child and run this. We have a child running. Okay, good. And did we see a hello? We did. Okay. What I wanted to make sure is we could use child game modes, because I want to keep the sound code in the master game mode, but I want to keep the game mode specific stuff in the children game mode for things like the target practice and the assault and things like that. I've never actually tried a child game mode before, and now we know it works. So the next one is, can we create an audio component? We can. Okay, good. So we should be good. We should be able to use my game mode as my come on, words, you can do this. I know you can do this. Should be able to use my game mode as my sound manager. That's what I meant to say. So let's go ahead and test some of this stuff out. So we don't need that anymore. We don't need that anymore. We're going to have a game mode specific interface, which we should already have right here. And we're going to go ahead and add a new one. And we're just going to call this one play sound. It's going to be very generic to start with, and it's just simply going to play whatever sound is passed to us. So we need a sound wave 2D for our... No, because we're gonna pass in cues. We're gonna pass in a cue for everything, but because the cues allow us better control. That's what we're gonna do. That would be smarter. And then we're just simply going to audio and play. But we need to set the sound on the audio component. So set set sound. Is it set sound? Yeah, there we go. So yeah, we'll just keep this super duper generic like this. Not sure how child game mode works. Do you BP to use it, or is it just run at the same time as the main and then access it? No, there is one game mode per map is how it is designed. So for example, my master game mode is my FPS game mode, wherever I put it. And that's going to be for general stuff. And then the child game mode will be set for each specific map. So for example, the assault map's going to have my assault game mode. The target practice will have the target practice game mode. And because it's a child, it's going to inherit everything from its parent. So it'll have everything specific in the child version. So the scoring and the timer for the assault mode. And then the parent game mode is going to control the sound stuff. That way I don't... The key here is the sound stuff is going to be handled by the game mode, and I didn't want to copy-paste code between multiple game modes. I've never used a child-parent game mode before. I had assumed it worked, but as I found out yesterday, don't assume things. So this should be pretty simple. If we call it play sound, we have a sound. So if we go to our framework, so we're going to have a struct, and we're going to add in a new variable, and we're going to call this the action sound. Keep in mind, we're not going to call this a firing sound, because this will be the same sound that will happen when we do the action button. We're trying to keep things as generic as possible. And this one's the sound cue. And I guess we can keep it at the end. There's no real reason to put it anywhere else. What do you generally put in the game mode blueprint? You can put whatever you want. You can put nothing in there. The way that Unreal has things structured is you want to try to keep things as not necessarily generic, but specific and generic as possible. I guess if that makes sense. So for example, my game mode may control a timer. In the shooting gallery, it may be a timer overall to see how many targets you can shoot. Whereas in the survival course, it's going to be how much time you have to finish. When the player starts, we're going to tell the game mode to start the timer. The reason we're going to use two different... The game modes are meant to be specific for the unique features for the game mode itself. So for example, I can generically have my player tell my game mode to start the timer, and if I'm using the assault game mode, it's going to know, okay, well, we need to do this when they tell me to start the timer. But if it's the target practice game mode, it's going to know, okay, I want to do this when they start the timer. So you could have different things such as different respawn rules. Maybe you have a, like traditionally you would think of a game mode as your capture the flag or deathmatch. And your deathmatch may have rules in place where when you die, you don't respawn. Whereas the capture the flag may have rules where when you die, you end up going into a queue and you have to wait 20 seconds before you respawn. You can generically handle it on the player level by simply telling the game mode you died, and then the individual game mode handles the specifics for the death in that game mode. And then since each map technically has its own game mode assigned to it, you are allowed to easily switch between, tweaking variables and things like that. Basically, think of it as specific sets of rules for that map. Is the easiest way to think of a game mode. So I put things such as handling death, handling score, handling timers, things like that. In this case, I'm going to put the sound system to cheat. The game mode is persistent, so I can always count on the game mode being there. I can easily get to the game mode by just doing get game mode from anywhere, from any blueprint. I can just do get game mode, so it's really simple to get to. And by having one thing that's always persistent and I can get to easily, I can have anything that needs to play a sound, send that information to the game mode, and then the game mode will handle, concurrency and volumes and things like that as needed. And I'm putting in the parent game mode, so that way every child will have access to the sound manager, basically. And hello, Bender. So we have a sound cue. We need to go back to our character, and let's hook up the sound cue for our weapon right here. So we know we're missing it from here, so let's go ahead and go to our weapon object. And we'll add in a new variable, and we'll call this one the action sound, right? Action sound, there we go. And this is a cue, and we make it public and expose on spawn. We can close that object and hook it up. So now we have a sound that's passed through for each of our objects. So now we can easily, somewhere when we want to fire off the sound, have it simply fire off the sound. So let's trace through our stuff. We have our character. Our character handles the button, checks to see if we should be able to do something in the current weapon, tells the weapon to handle action button 1, updates the ammo display. So this is kind of one of those things here where we have to think about it, because if you fire a bullet, you get one sound effect. If you fire a bullet with no ammo, basically you pull. So technically, it's you pull the trigger and a bullet fires out. We have one sound, and you pull the trigger and it's empty. We're going to have another firing sound. And that would technically happen right here, because basically this is where we could expand upon something if we want to do this properly. And we're technically going to play the sound before we actually fire off anything. And we don't need to update the ammo display, so we're going to want to have our sound right here, is what we're going to have right here. So I'm going to do 2 small changes here, because I like the way this is. I like the way this is going to work. So we're going to get our game mode. We're going to play sound using our message. And we're going to play a sound after we handle the action button, because no matter what, something's going to happen when we do the action button. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our interface for our handle action button 1, and we're going to extend it. And we're going to give it a new output of a sound cue. And we'll give this one a cue. And that this way the weapon is basically going to determine whether or not it should play the appropriate sound. So we hook it up like this. Now we're going to play a sound when we handle action button 1. We will need to go back into our data structure. We're going to add a new sound cue in here. We're going to call this success sound now. And we're going to call the second one failure sound. And we're going to do that one a cue as well. So we're going to do success sound and we're going to do failure sound. We'll go back into our character. Not our character. We need our weapon. We're going to give it another variable. This will be the failure sound. This one will be the success sound. expose this one, change it to a Q. And now we should have the ability to have a success and a failure sound. And hello, Kazi Makazi. And we have this successfully set up in here. Now we need to go to our character, tell it to hook up the success and failure sound. Okay, so now we're going to pass around a success and failure. And our weapon is going to determine what gets returned in our nice handle action button. So if they are reloading, we probably don't want any sound to play back, because it would be weird if you're doing a reload animation and they're attempting to fire by pushing the button, and we tell it to keep doing the fire and clip sound even though you're reloading. So we're going to play back nothing if they are currently reloading. Now we'll go to the next one. They're not reloading. Do they have enough ammo? That's our true count right here. We remove the ammo here, and we tell it, let's see, so current ammo count is equal to, so we're going to have to actually just play with a couple of these and figure that out, which is technically when it's shorter. So we tell the owner we need to reload. This sets the is reloading sound, set timer by function, reload start. So we still don't want to do anything if we're reloading, because we have the game set up to auto reload at this point in time. This one, I think we basically only need to fill in 2 sounds. I think what we need is, let's see, do they have ammo? Is their current ammo count equal to 0? True. If not, here's, okay, so this is going to be our success sound. This means they successfully fired off a bullet. So we're going to play a success sound. This, by the way, is probably a good time for me to have gone through and commented this code, because you notice here I came back a day later and I don't even remember what half these branches do. So past me should have came in here and said if something, if something, if something, if something. That way I at least knew what was going on. Because future me, or current me, is paying for it, and then future me is going to pay for it since I'm not going to comment it right now. Get the current ammo count. Do we have ammo? Yes. Then we're going to go ahead and reload. If not, here is our failure sound. And then this is our reloading event right here. We're going to move this over. Okay, so that should handle our sounds, assuming we had sounds. So what we want to do is record some sounds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop open Audacity, and I'm really quickly going to record some crappy sounds. So let's see if I can set my microphone up properly. I'm pretty sure it's this one. Let's see what its inputs are. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, good. We got proper inputs. Bang! 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 Okay, so we'll clip those out, and then we'll do a new one right here. Click! 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 Okay, so we've got some click sounds. I'm going to do the weapon, so I'm going to do swishing sounds. Swish, swish, swish. And I put this in the wrong spot, so I'm going to need to get rid of these. Let's do that again. Swish. Ugh. Woo. Okay, so let's clean this stuff up, shall we? Bear with me while I clean out some sounds. Bang, bang. Bang. Export selected audio. Let me make, where's my desktop? Temp, and then we'll do a new folder called temp sounds. This will be bang 1. Bang. This will be bang 2. And let's see. I think I need to clean some of these up. Okay. I'll export selected audio. Bang 4. Yes, these are definitely top quality. They are meant to simply work. That's all they're meant to do. Click, click, click. Oh, stop it. Over here, you stupid thing. Okay. Bang. We'll just call this out of ammo. Let's see. And let's see. Now I'm doing multiple ammos because I'm going to take multiple sound clips for everything, because I'm going to take advantage of a sound cue and allow it to randomize the sound for each one automatically for us. And there's the melee 1. I'm gonna admit these ones are pretty horrible, but that's generally what I aim for. Okay, let's see. That one's just bad. I mean, that was bad even for me. Okay, we've got some sounds. Let's pull these suckers into our game. New folder called audio. Then a new folder called weapons. And then a new folder called, technically we would want to have one set of sounds for each weapon, so we're going to go ahead and just have a naming structure here so we can easily add in sounds. So let's find our desktop. Let's see, and these are the sounds for that one, and then our melee has these ones, and there's all of our sounds, so we're good there. Let's save everything to disk. The sound cue basically allows you to screw around with your WAV file. That's what the cue is for. I intend on using it for allowing me to randomly pick a different sound. So for example, I'm going to do a audio, and it's always, I hate how I always call it audio, but it's called sound in here. So sound cue, and this one's going to be the, we'll call it the fire cue. They're going to be in different folders, but this is going to be a giant pain in the ass to find in the thing. So we're going to call it fire, and then we're going to call it by the weapon name. And then we'll call this one empty, and the weapon name. Like that, and then we'll just do the same thing in here. See, that should have been called fire. That should have been called action. Again, we're gonna try to keep everything named the same. And actually I should have probably called that success, huh? Let's call it success. We'll call success and we'll call it failure. See, I've named this thing 3 different times. Let me save this and fix my redirectors. There we go. And then for here we have sound cue, and this one's success cue. Yeah, wait, no, that was supposed to be called cue. That's supposed to be called knife. There we go. Okay, so we'll set up the pistol. We're gonna go with the success pistol. We want to do randomizers, so random, and add an input. Hook that up to output, and we do a right click and we do a wave player. We'll duplicate this 3 times. We'll hook up our wave players like this. Then we'll assign each sound to a wave. So this is going to be bang 1, bang 2, and these sounds I should have named better, but I'm not. But then now at this point in time, if we were to play this, it's going to pick a different sound at random out of our choices. So we get a little bit of a variation really simply. And you can even add in more stuff after that, like some attenuation or some Doppler effecting, some modulate. You can add all these funny things after and then modulate it even more to give variety. But we're just going to go with that. And then failure pistol, same thing. The nice thing is actually if I went to success pistol, copied, and pasted, there we go. And then now I just change this to add of ammo 1, add of ammo 2, and add of ammo 3. There we go. So those are my sound cues done. for the weapon. Those two. We go to knife, pull up knife. I should still be able to paste. Yep. Put that in here. We have melee 1, melee 2, and melee 3. Okay, now there's still some things we could put in here. We're going to tweak that as we go along. But at this point in time, in theory, if this has been done correctly, we should now be able to go to our data table and assign our sounds. So our knife, for example, has the success knife, and our pistol has the success pistol and the failure pistol. Now, if I did this right, I should have sounds, which I don't know if you guys will be able to hear. Well, I can hear sounds. I'm trying to get the reload sound working. Okay, so we don't have the click working on the reload. So what we need to do is breakpoint in and figure out why we're not getting the click working. So let's see if we can figure that out. Okay, so let's see. Step into. We are going down here to, let's see. So this is if we have enough ammo, we're going to go to false. So my failure sound should not have been here probably. So let's see. Ammo, if we have extra ammo. Okay, so this should have been, that should have been the correct one. So this should have been my failure pistol. This one, whoops. I hard-coded that, so that was not the appropriate thing to do. Seriously? There we go. Okay, let's try this again. Oops. And not have it debug. Pick up the thing. Run out of ammo. Good, I'm glad. Yeah, actually I'm going to pause the music while I'm doing this. There we go. Now in theory, because we have a melee weapon and we have nothing hooked up to our melee attack, nothing should happen. But we should still have appropriate sounds as needed. So now the nice thing is, because everything is inside of our framework for our game mode, and all we're doing is this, now we have the ability to change our audio settings as needed. We can set the max number of concurrency. We can prevent, if you go into, here, if we do this and fire, your sounds are basically overriding each other. If you go into the sounds, for example, and we went into like failure, we can set the concurrency on this to determine how many sounds we want set. So we could, for example, have 1, 2, we can only play the most current. So basically you can make it where you only hear the current sound, make it limit it to only 2 or 3. So depending on the type of weapon, we could change the amount of maximum sounds you hear at any given point in time, so we don't have an issue. The nice thing is we can also adjust it inside of here. And because this is one place to play sound, if we were using an audio mixer, which I don't have yet, but if we use an audio mixer, we could actually adjust the sound as needed. So you could have it where the more you're firing, for example, the louder it ends up becoming, or you could have it for a volume control, all controlled inside of our manager here. I'm wondering if there's anything I actually need to do. Oh, I need to hook up the melee stuff. We don't actually have that working. So let's hook up our melee attack, since technically we can't hear sounds because we don't have a melee method. So let's see. Okay, we need to start commenting some of this stuff for reload. That way I can at least find it. Okay. And actually some of this stuff should be broken up into other graphs, which I will do in a bit. But right now, for example, this is where? Oh, it's way up here. Okay, yeah, see? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a new graph. We're going to call our graph firing methods graph. And we're going to move our firing methods over into their own graph. That way, we can try to keep things a little bit cleaner. That way, when we're on our main graph, we can have a lot less crap. Yeah, the sounds are short enough. I don't need to worry about concurrency right now. Wondering why you're doing an is playing bool. I don't think I'm doing an is playing bool. Am I doing an is playing bool? Not doing. Because if I'm doing an is playing bool, okay. By using the sound cues, I don't need to worry about an is playing bool right now. If I properly where's my audio? If I properly set up the cues and their concurrency and different sound concurrency, for example, you could have a priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, priority 4 sound concurrency settings, and each of those have different priorities, and then they have different number, maximum amounts, and then the resolution rule. For example, if you're going to allow the most current, or if you're just going to only allow one to happen, basically. And then we set up our sound cues properly. So a voiceover would have a higher priority than a weapon sound than would a bird tweeting, for example. We really don't need to worry about managing the sounds. We let the engine manage it for us, which is what it's designed to do. If we were just simply going to send 10 sounds to my sound manager at one time, just straight sounds, then we might have to worry about what's playing, what's not playing, and things like that. But if we use concurrency rules properly, then we don't even have to worry about that. We just let the engine handle it. Anytime something plays, the engine is going to know what it should and shouldn't do. And right now, yeah, we have pretty small sounds, so it's not really an issue. One of the keys here, though, with putting the I don't think I'm going to need an is playing bool. I might, but if you can think of a situation when I might need an is playing bool, because overlapping sounds are part of reality. If you think about it, if you're doing 10 things at once from 10 different places, you're going to get 10 different sounds, and they're going to overlap. I mean, that's just what happens in reality. I'm not using positional audio for this stuff because it's coming from the weapon, so I'm not really worried about that. Other things should have their own audio components with their own concurrency rules based on where they're at in the world, so then those will be positional audio, so it's less worried about that. Well, if you can give me an example, James, on timing, we'll see what we can do if we need to. I'm going to implement the melee method right now. Oops, add custom event. Because you might have something. I tend to try to think ahead, but sometimes I definitely miss stuff. Okay. So all we're going to do with this one is... what are we going to do with this one? Are we even going to do anything with this one? I mean, do I just need a method? Hello, Nanopan and Katatus. Let's go back to our main event graph. Let's go back to here. You can get rid of this, and then method melee. There we go. Now, I think our biggest issue is... No, we should be fine, right? Action button 1. Okay, so give me a second to figure out what I'm doing wrong here. I think I know what it is. I don't think I have, inside of our weapon framework, the ability to handle melee weapons. So we're not reloading. this should fire because our current and our ammo per action should both be 0 on our knife. Let's actually verify that. Yes, so it's 0, so that should be firing. 0 minus 0, you set it to 0. If it's equal to 0, okay, so here's our problem. If we have a melee weapon, we're doing this one right here. This branch right here. Because basically our current ammo count is equal to 0. So the only time we should ever... So let's see. Show me your data table again real quick. Here's my data table. I think I know what I'm going to do to resolve this issue here. All of this stuff literally is completely pointless if I'm using a melee weapon. So it would probably be smart to have a switch on enum in the beginning based on our firing method. And simply, based on our firing method, determine what we're going to do. And for the most part, these two are going to fire off the same, and our melee weapon is just simply going to play its sound. Right here. So this, in theory, oops, not a failure sound, success sound, because if we're going to fire off, that's pretty much the only thing we care about here. So let's see what happens, shall we? Yep. Now we do have an issue with too many sounds playing. Which is mainly due to the fact that we technically don't have a reload timer on our weapon, mainly because we don't have anything implemented for melee. We literally only have an attack set up for line trace. But the point of this one was to get, well, first of all, melee is just here because I added it in. I don't intend on doing anything with it. Weapons are our main key here, and we have sounds working, which was our goal. And we have a reload timer working. The nice thing is, because our data struct does have a reload time for the melee, we could basically treat that as a swing timer. So for example, we could set this up as 2 seconds and only allow you to swing once every 2 seconds. Which technically, you know what? If we did this, you know what? I wonder if we could actually implement that right now just simply by moving some things around. Let's see. Let's try this, shall we? This is why I love blueprints, because moving stuff around in code does not feel nearly as much fun as blueprints. Okay, so in theory here, if we are reloading, we're going to do nothing. So if we use the reloading timer on the melee weapon to be its cooldown, then in theory we have the ability to do this section of code right here. One second. So this would be a good candidate to break down into a function, because we're basically duplicating the code. So I'm going to leave that for now because we can clean that up later. So let's do something like this. We're going to basically say we're reloading. We're going to make sure our reload time is valid because we found that out yesterday. And we'll return back the success sound right here. And then when we reload, we adjust the ammo count. It'll still be 0, 0. We don't set reloading and reload in. You know what? That might work without having to do anything else. Let's find out. Yep. I now have a 2-second melee swing timer. I'm spamming the button, but it's only going to allow me to do it once every 2 seconds. So there we go. Never mind. So I take back me not implementing anything for melee because we literally just did it. So there we go. This is really friggin' ugly, but it's gonna work for now, like that. So yeah, so we're going to go in, and we're basically, our reload timer is our swing timer for a melee weapon. And if we are swinging, we are only going to allow it to happen once. Okay, so that was really friggin' simple there. The only thing I had planned for today was the sounds, because that was all I cared about for doing it. Because I need to make sure these are broken up into separate videos for the documentation purposes, so I can also push only the changes for that section to source control. If anyone has any questions, comments, or suggestions, I'm working on the sound right now. If you saw anything I missed, feel free to comment and let me know. And in regards to James for overlapping, yeah, it could be an issue. You could prevent it. And the nice thing is you do have that really simple Boolean right here. We could technically allow it to only play one sound at a time. And it's easy enough. You technically, we wouldn't even need to do that. You have this right here. We don't even need a Boolean. Maybe you were referring to this one right here. So this right here technically limits our concurrency to 1 at all times, no matter what. Basically, if we're playing an audio component at any given time. Well, technically, if we're playing this audio component, we're only allowed to do it once. Oops, if audio is playing, we want if false. That kind of doesn't work. Yeah. So it works if I'm slow, but if you got to think about it, if I have a gun and I'm going firing 6 times in a second, it kind of doesn't sound right. Yeah. No, well, see, the hit sound I'm not worried about. The hit sound, that's a nice thing, because technically if I wanted to add in sound, I actually plan on adding in sounds for hits later. We have our item, our target, for example, and whenever it's hit, it fires off the handle was hit event. So all I have to do is have the target play back a sound. I could do, you know, we could do like play sound at location, and you give it the sound for the hit, for example, and then you put in the location, you know, get actor location, like this, and then the sound would be a sound asset, which is like a hit or something like that. And then you only allow then you set the max number of concurrencies, and this is basically going to play a fire and forget sound at the location where we hit of the appropriate type, because then you'd have the appropriate type based on wood, metal, and various things like that. This is how I would implement a sound inside of the hit. So yeah. So actually, I'm just going to leave it in there because it really doesn't matter. It's going to play nothing. So we'll leave that in there for now because we'll work on it later once I record more of my awesome sounds. This is the sound cue I'm using right now, Katatus. Kazi. Why play the sound through the game mode instead of just the weapon? If you add multiplayer to the game later on, you'd have to change it to the weapon. Why would I have to change it to the weapon? I'm assuming you mean something like the modulator or something, Katatus. If you want different sounds. Yeah, that would be fine if I could. Yeah, I already mentioned I could do a modulation after the random. I could do various other things. Yep. Nope, I mentioned that. This is all just super simple. Okay, so I see what you're talking about, Kazi. Yeah, that... The approach for these videos in this series, in this example project, is to basically progress along normal lines. Assuming you are someone either newer with Unreal Engine or game development and you're trying to go along with making a game. You might not know about the intricacies of multiplayer and issues like that, and that's something you will have to tackle when it comes to it. I don't like the videos that basically go, So in this video, we're going to go ahead and set up our variables. And then they spend 15 minutes creating a variable for everything they're going to use in the project, even if it's stuff they don't use for 10 videos down the line. It's a really inorganic way of learning. You're going to be like, well, what am I creating this for? I don't understand. By doing it like this, we have the ability to organically build as we go along. To answer the question in regards to the multiplayer, it's less along the question of where the weapon's coming from. It's more along where the player's at. And since we're in the game mode for playing the sound, we have the ability to just pass in a location. We could easily have on our blueprint interface. Where's our interfaces? Game mode. We can add a vector in here, really simply. And then all we have to do inside of our game mode when we do the play sound is we can just do a play sound at location. And we can have it do a play sound at location based on where the input came from, so whoever called it. And it'll play that sound at that location. And as long as we're using the correct sound cues, then we don't have to really worry about concurrency and too many sounds and things like that. So that would be really simple to basically add on later. I mean, technically, for example, if I did it now, I would just do play sound, new, sound location, vector, and then we can go into our game mode, and there we have our right there, and then all we have to do now is play sound at location, or even spawn sound at location. Basically depends on what we want. So we could do this, and then we just simply plug in the sound, and we plug in the location, and then now we'll end up playing a sound at location rather than playing a sound from this audio component. And you even have all the other extra options in here if we want. Yeah, there's multiple ways of doing it, and yeah, we could, for example, you're talking about moving it to the weapon. We could always, again, different ways of making things work. We have our character. If we were to add on a audio component to our character, for example, and we had an event in here, because you have different things. Yeah, you could have the weapon do it. You could have the biggest problem here, though, is our weapons are the way this is designed. Our weapons are objects. Our weapons don't have audio components attached to them is the issue. These weapons were designed to be data containers and not physical objects. So technically, we would have to have a audio component on the player, and then we could have a simple interface on here called play sound. And then you could have technically the weapon, you could have the weapon handle the playing of the sound and things like that. I mean, there's tons of different ways of doing it. I simply put it in the game mode because it makes it super simple. The different objects in the game can tell it to play stuff. So you could have a separate timer in the game that keeps track of time. You could have targets, for example, alert the player, like rather than having the target have its own audio component. Like, let's say you have 10 targets in the scene, and every target has its own audio component, and you want the ability to play back something like a congratulations sound, for example. You've hit a bullseye on this target, and you want to tell the player congrats. You want to give them a little bit of a special indicator that they bullseyed it. So you have the normal sound coming from the target, your ding sound, but then maybe you want a little fanfare to pop up on the player. If rather than having 10 different targets with 10 different audio components that could be playing the fanfare, the component, the target, can simply talk to the game mode and say, hey, play the fanfare sound. And then the audio manager, which is in our game mode, will play the fanfare sound. There's no right way. Yes, like you mentioned, pretty much exactly on point. Every programmer can do it his own way they think is most appropriate for the game he's working on. And the best part is usually there's no wrong way, as long as you're getting the right performance and the right result. That's what's nice. And yeah, I have no problem. I appreciate you asking the questions on my thought process. It does help if anyone else is watching this. There is a very good chance, if you've watched any of the other videos, that we will have to rework different things at different points to accommodate different scenarios. Multiplayer is not planned for this for at least another month or two, so we will work on that one at one point. That makes me ask, how would you play a sound that only the player would hear? If we're talking about multiplayer, then you just simply have the player play the sound. That's it. You don't replicate that information. You don't have the server tell everyone to play. You just have that player play a sound locally, for example. Yeah. You just have the object, for example, talk to the player that triggered it and not the server, and tell that player to play a sound. And then that player would hear the individual sound. If you had the object tell the server to play the sound, and then that server replicated to everyone, then everyone would hear the same sound. So that's the easiest way off the top of my head in terms of that one. Because you got to keep in mind, you have your player objects are different than not different, but you do have a player object which represents, the person, their machine, all their, their client, basically. The client is the correct word. You do have access to the direct client itself. Is there a node to talk to the server? Yeah, basically, I have not worked with multiplayer once. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to legitimately answer the question, but you have replication, which is basically telling the server what happened, and then the server handles things appropriately. I'm assuming there is something specific. I don't know. It's not very difficult from what I've seen. Kitatus has done multiplayer, so he'd probably have a much better handle on stuff like that. But it's replication is what it is. Yep. It's a good question, Kazi. You're working on a project that's going to make multiplayer in the future, and you're already trying to adjust it so you'd have less problems to work with. And that's a very good reason to do stuff like this and think about it. Spending 5, 10 minutes, 20 minutes staring at your screen, thinking about your options, even just roughly blueprinting something out just to see what possible problems you might run into is probably a really smart workflow rather than just hammering out everything and then refactoring it. But you do have to keep in mind, even if you end up refactoring something in the future, you still learn to do it 2 different ways, and you may now be able to incorporate a single player version and a multiplayer version 2 different ways, because the multiplayer may have like unnecessary extra stuff you're doing because of multiplayer. So, I mean, there's no real harm as long as you're learning, is the way I look at it. I don't have enough information about multiplayer to honestly answer the proper way of doing this, though. I was just going based off of the information that I know. Me personally, I showed you the way I'd probably do it. I have the play it sound node. I don't know if there's an issue with it. I don't know if there's a performance penalty, but it solves the problem. If you know where you need to play a sound, you have the play it sound node. If you need to play it from a specific player, you can always talk to that player from anywhere and then tell that player to play a sound themselves. Yeah. Okay. No, I appreciate these questions. I just corrected my code for my level up sound. Thanks for the tip. Well, I don't know what tip it was, but that's awesome. In case anyone was wondering, this was what Brian was suggesting. We use a modulator in here, and then we adjust the pitch and the volume. He didn't say which one he suggested. 0.7515. But basically, you can have a modulator right here, and then it gives you the ability to adjust slightly some things. By default, you can see a little bit of a volume change. So not only technically, for example, if you only had one sound, let's say bang 1, you could still throw it into your modulator. Give your modulator a little bit of a little bit more. So let's do it like a 0.85 to a 1.1 and to 0.9 to 1.1. So even with just this, it's still going to give us a little bit of a variation on our bullet effect, which I have the I have this plugged in, so we probably want to get rid of this for now. Now that, so we can actually have the multiple sounds. But here we go. So this would technically give us slight variations. You'll obviously want to adjust it, but it's an easy way to take one sound and have things changed. For example, if you've ever heard someone walking, and it's not always the. If this was a walking sound, for example, on wood, just adding a modulator with some slight changes into it would allow you to get that slight difference every time you walk, so it doesn't sound like it's just click, 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 click down a hallway. You'll get some slight variations by simply adding a modulator note in. And it's a good way to give some extra stuff. So technically, if we kept the modulator in, or you know what, I'll put the modulator in there. Why not? It can't hurt. But I'm gonna make it slightly different. We'll give our randoms here. We'll plug that into our modulator. If I can grab the arrow. We'll reset our values on our modulator, so that way they're very slight differences. And now technically we have a bunch of different variations, not only just these three. Yep, this is a really simple way. And the thing is, though, you don't. That's if you haven't used them before, use the sound cues. They are designed for stuff like this, to give you the ability to alter very simply sounds and to give you random. So I mean, because the other alternative is if we were in here and we wanted to play a sound, you know, we'd have to do something like, you know, random int and range, and then we'd have to plug an array with a bunch of different sounds, and we'd have to pass around groups of stuff. Passing around just simply a wave, and the wave contains all of our variations, is a great way of doing things. And yes, sound cues are awesome. There's so many different things in here. But it's sound, so it's also kind of crazy to learn. Let's see. Still very proud of the comment system we made, where the player can set his own animation sequences for attacks from separate animations. That is awesome, Kazumi. Animations are something I'm horrible at, that I'm hoping to incorporate here in the next next year. I'm hoping to start incorporating next year. What I'm going to do next year, starting with the 2017 projects, is I'm going to make sure it's under a branch of the Epic Unreal Engine project, so then I can legally include things such as the character blueprint and example project stuff legally for download. Then that will allow me to bring in the base skeleton blueprint and animations, and then when I can start working on setting up videos for animations and animation sequences and stuff like that, where you're building your own animations. I don't know, dynamically, I guess might be the right way. Basically having dynamic animation, which would be, I'd love to do, but I don't have the ability in myself to do it. Yeah, I know the basics of animations and animation coding. Ryan, who's Katatus, he has been working on some projects off and on, and he has gotten really good at modo and animations and modeling and stuff like that. He's done some really good work with that. He streams every so often. I hope he starts streaming more at some point. Just the holidays are hard to do it. But he's gotten really good at doing some stuff like that. And I hope to do it as well, but I am not artistically inclined, so unfortunately it just takes me a lot more work to get it all understood and digestible. On that note, it's been about an hour. Our goal is technically accomplished. We did add in sound. We have the ability to easily add in sound. I don't know why I closed that. Let me open that back up. We added the ability to easily add in sounds. So the nice thing is, if we have more sounds for our weapon, we just simply add them to our queue, really simply. If we have a new weapon to create, see, the nice thing about this now is, let's say, here, this is why I wanted to pull this back up. Give me a second. We have in a projectile weapon coming up here in 2 videos. I'm going to add in firing modes for the next video. So we're going to have a projectile weapon in the next one. So the nice thing is, if we want to do a projectile weapon, we have our data table. It's simply a case of, you know, add a new row. We name this one Boom Launcher, for example, and the ID would be Boom Launcher. And then we just fill in the variables. We have our cues for the sounds. We have the different firing method, what it looks like. You know, it's going to look like the pistol right now because that's all I did. You know, it's going to be a projectile weapon. It'll have, you know, different sound cues depending on what we want. And then to actually get into the game, all we have to do is find our weapon blueprint and drop in another blueprint for our weapon. And we're going to name this one, what? We call this one Boom Launcher. And boom, there's our Boom Launcher, all ready to be picked up. The data is ready to be passed along. Oh, we named it W, so that didn't help. There's our Boom Launcher. So it'd be ready to be picked up and set up and used by the player. And all the stats are in there already. Everything should work already. We just have to basically define our models, our data points for our weapon, and our sound effects. Now, technically, it's not going to work right now because we don't have our projectile firing method in place, which we'll work on. But the nice thing is it's really simple with the way the system's set up to just slowly expand over time. Where's my data table? And the nice thing is my Boom Launcher can go away by deleting it. Wait, so you could just do a crafting system by just creating a new row in your data table from blueprints at the moment you craft something. You cannot alter data tables at runtime. Data tables are data only, unfortunately. So to create something, yeah, so to answer that question, yeah, everything in a data table has to be defined at runtime. These are basically your bases. You could have like a pistol, like we have in here. Our pistol is our base data table, and then we could have a derived version of our pistol that we save later with just our variations on these things. Like if we wanted a silenced pistol, we could have the pistol as the base class, and then the silence, you know, subheader or whatever simply decreases the damage and increases the reload time, for example, or, you know, whatever we wanted it to do. These are just our base data. Yeah. To answer that one, yeah, unfortunately you can't edit a data table at runtime. But you could add items to your crafting system really simply by just putting them in your data table. You know, you define your ingredients in an ingredient data table, and you define your created items in the created data table, and you just fill in the blanks. You know, soup is made out of water and tomatoes. An inventory using data tables will not work. That is correct. Unfortunately, that will not work. You'd have to use something such as an object, or an array is traditionally used. An array of structures is traditionally used for an inventory. Yeah, because it's dynamic, you can't use a data table. That's your biggest thing. And I only want to say that with the caveat that technically you could make it work, but I wouldn't recommend it. There are ways of getting around it by using web servers and re-downloading, but it's just, I wouldn't recommend it. For a just assume a data table is read-only. It's meant to hold data and give you back information. And for an inventory system to hold stuff, you're looking at probably a structure with... you're looking at an array probably full of structures. Or even just an array of the item number itself would be perfectly fine for an inventory. That's technically kind of what I'm doing here. So I'd have to either go into C++ for structure inheritance, or do a huge structure for all the variables. More than likely, yes. If you're talking about like a base, you're going to have to do that. The other option is, I'm only defining my items inside of a data table so I can easily work with it. you could technically have an object like I have in here, and because you can have child objects as well, and you could create objects that represent your inventory items, and then simply shove those objects into an array to hold them. Then you don't have to worry about structure inheritance or anything like that, because you could have your base item object, which would have, you know, weight and value maybe, and then under that you have a food object which inherits from it, and then it would have, you know, durability or whatever else it has in it. And since it is the parent-child relationship with the class, the object classes, you wouldn't have to go into C++ to do inheritance that way, because you can construct objects inside of blueprints now. That's what I'm doing in here. None of these weapons physically exist anywhere in the world. They are all just objects held inside the player's inventory. Yep. That's exactly, yeah, that, because I was originally, the first video, if you check it out on Wednesday, was me trying to create stuff. The second version, which I'm using here now, the weapon slots simply hold weapon objects, which are objects. And using the construct whatever, you know, where it's construct object. Yep. There's tons of ways of doing this stuff. And James, yeah, don't feel bad about your eyes glazing over. If I watch a video on math or animation, like for example Thursday's video where they were discussing the new animation system, I pretty much was just playing Paragon and watching her do it as best as I could, because once it goes into animation and art, I can't do it. I just have to zone out. I get so confused by what they're doing that it is not my style. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Math and art are my downfalls, where I just glaze over. People start talking about vectors, rotators, gimbal lock, dot products, things like that, cross product, and I'm like, I just want my thingy to work, and I hope someone else figured it out. Yep, knowledge helps. That's why I like to learn as much about everything, a little bit at least. So I do appreciate everything. Hopefully that helped a little bit with your inventory system, Kazume, and some help on just my insight on why I'm doing this. And hopefully multiplayer's not going to bite me in the ass in a couple months. I hope everyone enjoyed, or at least didn't fall asleep too much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Monday will be the next stream. I'm not going to participate in the jam, in case you hadn't noticed. I've just got too much stuff going on right now, and I didn't really come up with an idea I felt inspired to work on. So Monday we're going to work on firing modes, and there's a good chance I'm thinking we'll work on firing modes and projectile. Firing should be pretty simple right now, based on how we have everything set up. It may take longer though, because I'm gonna have the weapon tell the user interface to populate the use. Yeah, see, so you know what? Actually, I'm gonna have to add another one in here. That was in the wrong spot. You know what? We are actually gonna have to work on something different. And this isn't even gonna be this is gonna be the prototype now. FPS prototype is what it is now. And this is adding our weapon UI, because right now we don't have a weapon UI, and technically the firing modes need to link into the weapon UI in order to properly display. So we're gonna have to work on a weapon UI. So we might work on the UI and the firing modes then on Monday, and then go from there. So I'm gonna go ahead and mute it. I hope everyone, again, I think I've said, anyways, I'm gonna mute it. It's gonna stay muted for about 30 seconds or so, and before it drops off, so anyone who's in 30-second land doesn't see it immediately disappear. Everyone have a good rest of their day, and have a good holiday weekend.